Well, welcome to the M&A Symposium 2021, our breakout session panel interview. Your peers are planning and preparing for exit now to prepare themselves for a smooth exit and transition plan. So what are you waiting for? My name is Jane McQuillan, and I'm the owner and president of Journey Consulting. We're a strategic management consulting firm that works with family-owned and privately held businesses to help them grow value in their business, to position them at some point in time for an exit or transition. That could be 2 years from now, could be somewhere well into the future. What I would like to say is, our panelists here have really separate journeys that they've been taking as far as their businesses, their business transitions, those journeys really have led them to an eventual transition. Some have transitioned, one has not yet, but is in a succession planning standpoint. And their experiences and challenges and successes along the way are positioning them for a successful exit. But both of these panelists today have really gone through a process, and that process has set them up to be successful whenever that timing is. So without further ado, I want to jump right into our panelists, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Give us your name, your position, company, a little bit about your industry so they kind of know what you've been doing, and then kind of where you're at in the process, because you're in very different positions in terms of the transition. So with that, Crystal, I'll have you start.
Hi everyone, my name is Crystal Cook and I'm the president at Ready Transports in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I've been with the company for approximately 5 years now, and it's a company that was started by my father in 2006. Our business, our industry is in secure transportation, so we transport detainees to and from secure facilities. As far as my position, as far as succession planning, transitioning goes, we actually started that process about a year ago through strategic planning, and it was getting my parents ready for that transition. So there was a lot of work that we did with them. But then I also realized that there's work that I have to be doing right now in order to prepare for not just that transition, but for when it's time for me to transition. So I'm kind of, right at the beginning of the process and really looking forward to the rest of the journey.
Awesome. Tim.
My name's Tim Vandenhavel. I'm the president of Thermoc. We manufacture thermal spray equipment. We're 20 years old, and we started that business after our former business moved to relocate, and some of the employees then started. So I have 3 partners, or 2 other partners, and we transitioned recently. The process took about 2 years. We would have probably sold earlier, but COVID hit, and then we had to migrate through those challenges as well.
Awesome. So Tim, I know obviously you started the business with your 2 partners at the time. When you started that business, did you even think about how you were going to get out of this business?
Not a thought. We just thought we would start the business, and as things progressed and became successful, that things would fall into place. But knowing now, almost when you start, you should think about getting things in order and keeping documents secure, because when it happens and it's 20 years later, you go hunting for a lot of stuff. So
what even got you thinking, Tim, about saying, boy, we need to start doing something to plan for this?
We've been doing this for 20 years now, and as we get older, you start thinking about retirement, and you really, it sneaks up on you. Thinking early what you want to do and what you want out of it and how that transition should take place would pay big dividends if you began early, like 5 years ahead of time. But who thinks 5 years ahead of time? You're thinking, we're caught up in the daily business. You're looking at 5 to 6 months. You're caught in the business all day long, and then all at once you look at it and say, what, in 5 years I want to be retired, or where's the business going? So thinking about it ahead of time definitely is something that one should think about earlier than later.
Yeah, and I think some of the times too, business owners they just think that it magically is going to happen, right? Either that someone's going to come along and offer them money to take out their business, or there's a lot of times an assumption that management's just going to take over the business, and that's just not reality a lot of the times. Now, Crystal, in your situation, it's a little bit different, right? Having your parents owning the business. What got you even thinking that you should be doing something? Because they didn't really initiate this process.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, by working with your firm, we really learned a lot about small business in general, and that was just a natural part of the responsibility of a business owner. As Tim mentioned, the early planning. And so when you first mentioned that to me, Jane, I felt like that was something that was critical for our business, because the preservation of legacy in our business is very important to my mom and dad. And in our industry, there aren't many companies like ours. And so part of what makes us successful is that legacy. And so we really wanted to build that into the succession plan. My father never imagined, like you said, it's very day-to-day, our businesses, and just one day he was like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this. And I said, well, how about we make a plan? And so that's what really led us to the process. Also, the strategic planning component really helped, because it just sort of naturally became part of the strategic plan once we understood how important it was.
Yeah, and in your situation, it's probably a little different than some, is that your employees were starting to ask, hey, what's going to happen, right? Because they've invested a lot of time and effort into that business, and if your parents aren't owners, what's going to happen to them? So the planning piece of it too is not just about you as the business owner. It really is what's going to happen to your employees at some point in time when you transition, and what are your priorities as it relates to that. So Tim, when you started thinking, going, oh my God, I want to be out of here and I don't really have a plan to do that, where did you start, or how did you, did you talk to people? Where did you get kind of that next step of where do I go from here?
Well, having two partners, we had discussions on are they interested in taking it over? Do they want to buy out? What's their long-term plans? And we decided that no, they weren't interested in doing that, so we decided that we should sell. And then how do you do that? So we talked to our accounting people and some friends and people you know over the years who've been in business or transition. But I went to a seminar, and one was a mergers and acquisition seminar, and Jane was putting on a talk, and I sat in on that, and then it was thought-provoking to see what she said, and I'm sitting there thinking, we don't know a lot about any of this. So I went back to my partners, and we decided we would contact her, and we had a meeting, and she sat down, and we just talked in general about our expectations, what we thought we wanted to do, and then she brought up ideas that, what's your personal transition, what do you want out of it, the timing frame of all of it, how is the business structured, and are you ready for selling, is your inventory too high, working capital, and on, and she laughs. But there's a lot, and when you haven't done it before, it's a big eye opener. So
talk a little bit more, because obviously your dynamic of partnership was unique. So one of the things that we did with each of you is we interviewed each of you separately, right, to understand what your desires were. And there were differences, right, in terms of where that ended up. So maybe talk a little bit about, for you, it wasn't just about exit planning for Tim. It was about exit planning for Tim and his partners. And everybody kind of had a different picture of what that was. So what were some of the challenges or some of the issues that you had to kind of work through just in that process? We
all had different ideas and similar, but everybody wanted a little bit different out of it. And were they ready yet, or is this a 3-year thing, or are we doing it now? And it's paramount that you have someone as your quarterback, or someone who's on your side, so you can navigate those situations. She brought in other resources. She certainly had some input on what's the best plan. She laid them out, and we all could agree upon it. Had we not had someone like her on our side helping us, the whole process would have been, we would have struggled. We weren't all in agreement. The more she was involved and could navigate and explain pretty much in detail how things had to transpire, that really helped us keep it going forward, so.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, whether it's a partnership or not, when you're planning for transition, some of the things to think about too is what are the desires of that business owner when they're exiting in terms of, is legacy important? Do I want to sell to private equity? Where do I care if my employees get relocated somewhere or they move the business? When you start having those conversations, those become real, right?
Yep.
People that help you build those businesses. And so sometimes just getting to that understanding before starting is a real critical piece. So Crystal, for you, a little bit different, right, in terms of the transition. And part of it was the personal side. So talk a little bit about the whole family dynamic piece of it for you, because now you're looking to eventually buy out the business. There were some stepping stones before that to start moving them down that path. So maybe talk a little bit about that dynamic and that process.
It's one of the challenges that I think we faced as a company, and for me personally, is that my background is not in small business. And so I came from the education world, and I felt like I had strong leadership abilities, but understanding everything I needed to understand about business was a bit of a hurdle for me at the beginning. And so through the process, I came to understand, I think, just how comprehensive it really is. But the other side of that was trying to explain that to my parents, who also didn't specialize in small business. This was a great grand idea that my father had one day, and it took off like a shot. But at the same time, explaining that to him was a challenge, but being personally involved was also a challenge, because it's very sensitive, talking about your parents' wishes. And I think that having somebody to facilitate that conversation and kind of stand in between and just say, these are your options. I agree with you. To have somebody say, these are your options, and to remove the emotional component from it, for me, was very, very important. And it helped us make sound decisions that were deliberate.
Yeah, and in your situation, you had a lot of other siblings that are not in the business, but needed to be dealt with in terms of this planning, which always is an interesting dynamic in a family business to do that.
And I think it helped that you asked how we started the process. The first thing we did was that business valuation. And that just laid out the fair market value of the business currently, which put my mind at ease, because that was one of my concerns, is how is my family going to be integrated or disintegrated from this process? It was very clear to me then.
It gave you a starting point.
Yes.
Yeah. So Tim, talk to me a little bit. So when you went down the process, one of the conversations that we had with each of you is, do you want to stay on in the business or not stay on in the business, right, in terms of a transition? So talk to me a little bit about your decision in that process and how that not only impacted kind of the who, right, in terms of the sale, but also, what impact did that have on the value of your business?
The further we got into the whole planning process, it became apparent that the value of the business would go up if the existing management team would stay on and be involved, not just short term either. And as like I said, it progressed. I guess when you go into it, you have to think about it early enough, and then it's whatever you think is going to happen in the beginning, it's going to change, and the process takes a different pathway, and you navigate through it, and you end up with something that hopefully you're pleased with. And in our case, it was very good. So.
Yeah, and in that situation with having three partners, I mean, the end game was one completely exited the business, another has stayed on in some capacity to be determined how long, and then yourself stayed on as president. So you did do, a private equity transaction, and maybe just talk a little bit about your mindset pre-sale and post in terms of private equity.
So we've always heard, and we're in machining and building equipment. We're not in the sale and resale of businesses, but we've always heard that equity firms will come in and strip it down and milk it for a little bit and dump it. And because of our employees, we certainly didn't want that to happen. So our big goal was not to sell to an equity firm. Well, we sold to an equity firm, and it's been very positive. it's the right match, it's the right fit. They want to grow the business. It'll give opportunities for all the existing employees that they help us grow the business. It was like I said, you start out thinking what you know, and things change, and it's been very positive. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical piece. I don't think there's a single business owner that I've started with from a transition standpoint that said, here, this is the path I'm going to take, and it's the path they ended up with, which is why the planning piece is so critical. It gives you time to shift, to maneuver, to change as things change in terms of that piece of it. So what about, Crystal, I'm going to ask you in terms of the financial planning. So obviously exit and transition planning requires financial planning for the person selling the business, but it's also critical for you in terms of looking to buy the business. So talk to me a little bit about that process for you, kind of on both sides, for both your parents and yourself.
Well, you're very right that the way you start is not how the process goes or how you think it's going to go. I remember the day you looked at me and you said, do you want to buy this business? And I was like, no, I don't have that kind of money. And then you said, why not? And that really challenged my thinking, and I was worried about the financial component, which is why the planning piece is so critical. Because I didn't know about all of the different options for how you could plan for that. Well, one of the first things we needed to do is make sure that the end result is that mom and dad can exit the business. And so their financial planning was critical, and they had never been to a financial planner prior to this process. When we started, they didn't have a will, those were all things that always went on the back burner. So just committing to the process helped get those very critical pieces done. That is really what worried our employees and why they asked about it, as you mentioned, just because mom had a serious medical situation that led them to go, wow, what would happen if we lost one of them ever? And then we found out what would happen to the business if we did lose one of them. And so felt it was very important then to make some plans. As far as my own financial planning is concerned, we took care of them first, but I realize now that's not something that I can put on the back burner. Yeah. I need to have those plans in place just as well prior to my purchase of the business, and even to the extent that I'm already starting to think about who succeeds me, yeah, and how do I prepare that person and bring that person into this conversation. All that said, I still don't know how I'm going to buy the business yet. But I am confident, yeah, that the process is solid and that I will learn about all of that, and I will be very well prepared to do so when the time is right.
Yeah. Yeah. So the financial planning, and obviously even from your exit, is making sure, and you guys were all positioned pretty well, but that was part of the process, right? Because that would have been a big issue. And we asked that question in the process of, what do you need out of this business for you to be comfortable? And thankfully, we kind of got similar answers to that, yep, in terms of that piece of it, because of how quickly you ended up going to market, right, in terms of the business. So let's talk a little bit about valuation and what creates value. So Tim, you know, early on you had a couple preliminary valuations. Did you understand the value of the business? And more importantly, did you understand what created value in the business?
Not so much starting out, but as we went through the process, it became apparent that having your ducks in a row and inventory levels and documents and employees and long-term customers, and it all creates value that almost by attrition you gain. I guess I don't.
Yeah, I think part of it for you, I mean, one of the things I know when we were going through the process in terms of understanding value is, you know, you had some key components within your business, right? You had recurring revenue coming in from your part sales, you built equipment, you had some proprietary things, you know, that really started adding value. And when it came time to sell, I mean, those are things that really got valued in the process that you probably took for granted, right? As a business owner, and go, yeah, they were valuable, but I didn't really understand how much.
Right, during the due diligence process, all that would come out. They would ask questions, and we would do diggings and get some numbers, and you know, you talk about EBITDAs, and those are terms we haven't heard before, and ours were really good. So,
is there anything you would have done if you know? Because again, we ended up going to market pretty quickly just because of where you guys were at from a partner standpoint, and staying on and growing the business was not a drive for any of you. So we said, you're at kind of top value now. We need to go to market, because your initial time frame was we could wait a little bit longer, right? And so is there anything you would have done different as it relates to either building value or just kind of taking your approach to exit?
Yeah, we certainly would have, knowing now what we didn't know then, is that we would have hired additional employees. Our thought process was, let's not hire people, let's not get into a new building, let's not keep building this business. We kind of were stagnant, and we had plans to do that. We thought, let the new people do it, let the new owners, and totally, we shouldn't have done that. We should have hired more people, we should have kept it growing, we should have proved that building it up is a better thing, and it makes the transition much easier.
Yeah. Crystal, what about you? I mean, obviously you had the valuation done. Was it something you expected? Did you understand the value? Did you understand what kind of went into that value? And what are you doing, I'll call it even today, to say, okay, we know where it is, but we want to grow it from here?
Okay, so this is an interesting piece of the puzzle for me, because as the president of the company and also the daughter of the owners, the person that the business will transition to, I'm at an interesting spot, I think, because when I came into the company, we started looking at data, we started breaking down our pricing and really digging deep into how we did our processes. And one of the things that challenged us when I came to the company is that we had some contracts that weren't priced correctly, and as a result, we were losing money. So we identified those areas. You helped us fix those gaps. And then the business started to grow significantly. The profit margin increased. And then I realized as I grow this business and it gains value, okay, it's going to be more expensive when I want to buy it, right?
Right.
And so understanding the pieces that I need to have in place all along the way in order to make it a smart purchase for me, right? At the same time, as I keep my promise to my mom and dad and grow this business to make it successful, the question that we kept coming around to is, well, what is really in it for me, and what are they going to do to retain me, which is something I never thought about before. And it caused me to sort of step outside of the situation and look at it like I'm not just a daughter here. I am a significant and important employee in this organization. And so we had those conversations. To answer the question about did I understand where all the value was? No, but I felt like when we got the valuation back, it was very clearly laid out, and I understood one of the gaps that we have right now, you talked about documents, Tim, is really making sound processes and policies that are reproducible so that, and this is what I kept in mind, the business always has to be saleable, whether it's to me or to somebody else. And I want all of those in place before the business transitions to me. So that's what we're working on right now, is really thinking about how we work on a day-to-day basis, and then long-term for the longevity, where do we have gaps that we need to address yet?
Yeah, and I think one of the key things too in both of these situations and in other business owner situations is, this is a process, right? And it's strategic in terms of positioning yourself, it's processes, it's looking at options, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know what things are going to play out. I know Crystal had commented on, one of the owners. I mean, timing is everything, right? So as we're talking about this, there was a very serious incident with one of the owners, and, close to, something we're going to have to respond very quickly type of a situation, and none of us know what that's going to look like. So what we're talking about here isn't just about exit and transition, right? It really is about strategically building value in your business each and every day, because we don't know. We can't plan for what's going to happen down the road. So these are the things I know, Tim, like I said, when you started doing this, it was like, I'm ready to get out. I looked to buy the business. That wasn't an option. We got some things to the table, and we said, hey, we need to move this along a little bit more quickly in terms of that. But now you're in a position as president of the new entity. And what are you learning in that whole process? Because that's a little different than, just being sole owner, right, with these other partners and making all those decisions.
Yep, having your processes in place, and the people are key. a company's going to want to buy a business where you have everything clicking, things are moving forward. If they have to come in and clean everything up and restructure things, it hits the value very big. So having the new equity firm in place and wanting to grow the business, they're involved, but they're behind the scenes, and they've got some big plans, and it's exciting and it's rejuvenating to be part of it, that this is what we think we should be doing all along, and now we're going to do it. So.
Well, and for you in that situation too, you were able to reinvest in this new entity. So you took a lot of money off the table, which was great, right? But now it gave you another opportunity to really grow that value and still have a significant impact and ability to drive that process.
Correct.
Would you have thought about that as an option when you first looked at
Not
exit
when we
planning?
first started, but
Yeah.
as I said, it changes. What your initial thoughts are, the path changes directions, and as long as it's going in the right direction, that's ends up good.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
hats off to you. You did a good job steering us in
I'll
the
pay
right,
you later for
the
that.
right,
Yeah.
the right direction.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about challenges, because being a business owner in general or leading an organization, there's a lot of challenges. And because not only, to your point, you're dealing with the day-to-day activities, and then you're supposed to be thinking about how do I build value, how do I eventually exit this business, and even when you start going through that process, what were some of the biggest challenges or surprises? And Tim, I'll start with you in terms of when you entered into starting to think about exit planning, what were the biggest, wow, that's, surprise in terms of that, but also successes, right? So there were some challenges along the way. And what were some of those challenges that you faced?
You're doing the business daily and you're involved in it, and now with the sale and all the extra things that get piled on top of it, all your due diligence, all your paperwork, everything you have to find out, identifying employees really stand out in a time like this. You find out what they're made of and what their aspirations are as well, and it just things change and things come to the forefront, and we're in a very evolving business daily. Customers call, you still have to take care of them. It's just it's time management. I don't know.
Well, and for you though too, like you said, we started that process of selling the business pre-COVID, right?
Oh yeah.
Then we went into that drawn out time frame during COVID, and there was a hit to the business, right?
We were supposed to close in February, right when COVID was hitting, and that kind of put the brakes on everything. And then nobody knew how were we even be able to keep open. Had the business not been an essential business, we would have closed the doors and shut down. As it turned out, we were deemed essential, and we stayed open, and we've navigated through COVID very well, and we recently sold in October. So.
Yeah, and understanding that too, and from selling to anyone, whether it be private equity or others, coming through this time from a COVID standpoint, is how fast did that business rebound, right? And due to the fact that you did have some consumables and, it was equipment and it's somewhat essential in terms of the manufacturing operations, your business was able to rebound fairly quickly.
It did.
In terms of that. And so, that comes back to, again, what's creating value within your business. What created value is, part of it was the industry, part of it was the niche products that you had and the consumables. So you were able to rebound. Had you not, that sale probably would not have gone through.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
In terms of that piece of it.
We rebounded very well. June was a little bit slow. Took about a third dip, and then it just kept ramping back up, and now we're ahead of schedule again. So.
Yeah, so that focus on strategy is critical at all times. Yep. So on your end, kind of jumping into this process, knowing there's that family dynamic, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you, Crystal, in navigating this? Just even starting this exit planning, because I know you said earlier, it wasn't on their radar, they weren't thinking about it, and in some respects, they didn't even see it as a priority, right?
Correct. My biggest challenge is that my boss is also my dad. And one thing that helped him be so successful in starting this business is that he doesn't really keep a schedule and he doesn't make plans. He goes with the flow. He's very responsive. But at the same time, when it comes to making strategic plans, it's something he's always been interested in, but never really had anybody help him navigate that. So the biggest challenge that I faced was getting them to see the priority in making these plans. And unfortunately, that medical issue, he called me and he was like, we really need to get started on this. But then I know, for me to make the appointments that they had to keep, not just with their attorney or their financial advisor, but then also when we would bring them into meetings together, that was a little bit of a challenge for me. So it really helped to have you be the facilitator and to act as that in-between person, because that took, once again, it's kind of like, it's removing the family dynamic. And I thought that really worked well. So I was able to have conversations with them at dinner at night about the family piece of it. And when we were in the office, it was like, this is the business part of it. So it really helped us distinguish, the separate responsibilities that go with each piece of that transition.
Would you guys, either one of you, have thought from a process standpoint of exit planning that it was as much personal and as much personal financial planning as it was about the business? Would you have anticipated that early on, that would have been the case? Either one?
We had the financial planning part of it pretty much in place for quite a while. What we did, the personal aspect of it, with having partners, it's imperative that you have someone be your quarterback. It helped the whole process. I'm not sure it would have even went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, looking back, it makes complete sense how it all ties together. But no, I never thought that, I would be looking at 2021 like, this is the year I have to do my will and I have to get my financial plan set. I always thought, well, that's something that I would do later in my life. But now it's like I can't get started soon enough. So it is definitely integrated. And no, I didn't expect that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Neither did my parents.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, as we're talking through this, is this is a process. So it's one, understanding the value, which you both have talked about, of knowing what is it even worth, right, and knowing where that's at. But then how does that integrate? I mean, this is about you personally as a business owner. It's your finances. It's what do you want to do life after? Have you planned for that? So it's not just about the business when it comes to planning for an exit. It is about the personal. It's about the financial. It's about the family dynamics, right? What are the impact? I mean, you have siblings that are not in the business. How are they feeling about all of this? And is it documented? I know one of the biggest concerns you had is, boy, if something happens, this isn't documented. What's going to happen to the business? How is that going to play out, within our family?
Yeah, to be very frank with you, it was a deep concern because, in my family, there are some assumptions that were being made that I think, in my mind, were rather erroneous. I mentioned before, when I came into the company, we had to do some heavy, hard work to get it to where it is today. And I really felt like, why should my sisters get to sit back and ride the wave of comfort? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure everybody was taken care of the way that mom and dad wanted them to be. This is part of the reason why it's important to me to transition the business. I want to buy the business from them, not have it just go into what do we do with this now, because I didn't want there to be a family fight there. And so I want to buy the business outright, and that way everything is fair and square. And yes, to answer your question, it is documented several different ways. We worked with a very good attorney who really helped and asked every single question you could imagine in a way that made it very comfortable for my parents, who are now very confident in the plans that they have. And that was part of what was holding them up from making those plans, is they didn't know how to address some of those dynamics.
Yeah, and I give them credit, because that's a big issue, right? When there's a family business specifically, in terms of that transition, of really having that documented. And most parents don't want to be having those difficult conversations, right? I've had it where, I've had some very ugly family situations where the parents are like, I'm not having that conversation. It's just going into the trust and we're dividing it equally. that's a mess, right? And it basically is just a dump on the next generation, and it never turns out well. I mean, bottom line, it never turns out well. So that planning becomes really critical because it does end up affecting the business, right? If all of your siblings all of a sudden became owners in that business, I can guarantee you that business will be impacted by it, right?
I don't know that we would have a business.
Exactly. So that planning is really critical, like I said, on that end. Now, Tim, on your end, from a partner standpoint, knowing you have 3 partners, you started the business, I'm assuming like every partnership, it starts at the beginning and you're like, partnership is great, this will be fantastic. What did you learn from that experience and what would you do differently in terms of being in a partnership?
Partnership is great starting out. You would probably never do it on your own in some cases. As the business grows, everybody's ambitious, everybody's doing everything. As people, and you become successful and the business starts profiting, people's aspirations change, their ideas of what it takes to build the business change, and when you're equal, you have to work with each other and figure out the next steps. I would, in hindsight, there should be, anybody starting a business as partners, you should have a buy-sell clause in there that after 5 years or 7 years or multiple years, that you can buy the other partners out for whatever it's valued at, and it should be reciprocal. So if they don't want to sell, then you should be able to get out for that same price. If otherwise, you're kind of stuck. So I think that's something partners should take care of.
Yeah, and that comes back again to getting all your ducks in a row because it always starts out rosy, right? It's exciting, it's new, and it is, but not everything goes well. And making sure that that's good. No different. I mean, I'm sure you get along pretty well with your family members, but things change when it's about money and it's about the business and what should we get and what are we not getting in that process. So just looking in terms of kind of looking back, right, and saying, okay, this we started this a little over 2 years ago, I think it was. And what would you have done differently in terms of that, in either starting earlier or what were some of the things that you said, man, I wish I would have known, or I wish we would have done something a little bit different?
Well, knowing more now, we would have started a little bit earlier, but we would have continued to build the business up versus becoming complacent and just kind of being status quo. I think we lost value in that process for sure. So that would be a big one. The personal financial stuff I pretty much had in place. And it's a good thought process. What are you going to do after retirement? I don't have that issue. So there's plenty to do.
That's because you're still working. You don't have that issue yet.
I know.
And I think to that point too, I mean, I think early on you always said you wanted to at least stay on for a couple of years in a transition, assuming the right fit and all of that. Has that been a good decision for you, or would you have done anything different with regard to that?
No, it is. Initially I thought I'd stay on for a couple of years. Now I'll stay on for a long time. It's going to grow. I'm happy with the new owners. I'm still heavily invested in it, and I'm looking forward to the future, so it's been a good thing.
Yeah, that's really, to your point, I think they've probably brought in what you guys didn't want to do or take the risk to do, right? Because obviously growing it is risk.
It is, and it's your own money when you're doing those risks, and now it's still some of yours, and they also bring in experience, so.
Right, yeah, to complement you. So in that process, has it been a good experience for you?
Yes.
Is the outcome kind of what you
Yeah, but I don't
expecting?
know where we would have been had we, initially you go, well, we'll just sell to one of our big customers. They'll buy us. And it turns out that we probably got a significant more higher value for the business than if we would have tried to do that. And again, I don't want to give you too many kudos, but you did a really good job. So I'm very happy.
And it was, and you guys did great. I mean, what you expected to get and what you ended up getting was significantly higher. So you're in a great spot. What about you? Just in terms of going through the process, anything at least, and I know you're early on in the stage, but anything that maybe you would have done differently, or anything that you're looking ahead to and saying, boy, I need to make sure that we're staying focused on this?
No, not at this point. At this point, I feel good about the direction we're heading and the things that we need to do. I am fortunate in that I give Jane a lot of kudos as well, just because, we're very deliberate about who we work with. And I know that I need to learn more about my business yet, business acumen and everything, and I feel like we've surrounded ourselves with a good team of people who are really mentors to us, not just consultants.
Yeah, and kind of to just kind of close out that question a little bit, if you're talking to business owners and in terms of, who do you think is critical that they engage with in terms of, type of specialty or, the real key advisors, right? Yes. Who would you say are key advisors that you need to have on your team? And Crystal, I'll kind of start with you.
Without a doubt, strategic planning for sure. And I know it sounds so odd because when you start a business and you're excited about it, it doesn't maybe make sense in your mind to start planning for transitioning out of it. But that's exactly what I would say. Strategic planning, succession planning are the two key things to begin with when you're thinking about business.
And who did you pull in from an advisor? I mean, obviously we helped you with some of the strategic planning, but who are some of the other critical advisors that you've needed on your team?
Are you asking for names or firms?
No, just
Okay.
in terms of types of roles that
we focused on leadership development. I rely heavily on my banker. And then as far as strategic planning, that was with you guys, succession planning. Then you need a financial planner, a financial advisor, and an attorney, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what about you? I mean, who did you kind of reach out to? Because obviously you had a lot of advisors.
Well, through your guidance, though, a broker.
Yeah.
We interviewed 3 or 4 different brokers. We settled on one. Our mergers and acquisition attorney was just a key element in the whole thing. All the legal stuff that you have to navigate through it's important to have a good one of those. Accounting firms, financial planners, transition planning.
Last question. You're talking to the business owners out there and saying, this is what I suggest you do. If I were you, this is my advice. This is the thing I would suggest for you to do or to move forward with if you're starting to think about, hey, at some point in time I need to get out of this business. What would you tell them? Tim, I'll start with you.
Start early. Start thinking about it. Business-wise, keep growing it, and when it comes down to the point where even if you have a conversation 5 years before you want to pull the trigger on stuff, have somebody on your side, because if you haven't gone through it before, you don't know what you don't know, and it was a real eye-opener. So you need somebody on your side coaching you through it.
And I can piggyback off of that because I would echo that. My advice immediately and without a doubt would be, you're a small business owner, or small business leader. I think that your primary role, a key responsibility for you, is to find your people. Surround yourself with your team of consultants or mentors, because you're not expected to know and do it all. You need the experts to come in and advise.
Awesome.
Definitely.
And it will change.
Yes.
And
Your direction will change.
It will change. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank our panelists, Tim and Crystal. I think you did an awesome job, so thank you so much. And I hope that you've heard a few valuable nuggets, whether you're a business owner or whether you're an advisor to business owners, right? Because you come across a lot of situations, and just being able to have that conversation. And there's some things that you can start implementing. But I think the most critical piece really of this whole session is, building value, planning well in advance, because you don't know when you're going to exit. So planning now for when that time comes. And again, consistently building value and positioning your business, because it's always good business, right? To grow your business, to strategically add value to your business. And why wouldn't you want to have a business that's consistently building value? So none of us have that crystal ball. We started with, into 2020 without knowing COVID, and COVID hit. No one could have expected that, right? So thank you for joining our session. I'll be available at the Q&A session from 3 to 3:30 later today, and please join me to answer any additional questions you have. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.